Hello, welcome to Culture TV. In this video, I'll be taking you on a virtual tour of Russia, as it were, and in particular, we'll be focusing on different modes of transport and all the associated vocabulary, so that by the end of this two-part video, you will have gained all the necessary basics. You will be fully equipped to go traveling in Russia by yourself. So do stay tuned, there'll be lots of fun, useful and interesting information coming up in this lesson right now. So this is lesson 55 of our online program, Let's Speak Russian, and this is the first part of a two-part video on traveling in Russia. However, before we start, there is one last little section on motion verbs that we haven't covered yet, and we should do ideally so that we can understand the content of today's lesson a bit better. However, I do understand that if you're here as a one-off, this might not be that relevant for you, so by all means feel free to skip to the following time code. Okay, but we are now going to look at some motion verbs then. So what do we know already? Well, so far we've met the verb to go and all its derivatives, so that's when we add prefixes to it, right? We've seen how it differs depending on direction, aspect, and the mode of transport, or indeed the absence of it. Now, with the following verbs, it is actually quite clear from the meaning whether transport is involved or not. Take, for example, to fly. If we're talking about ourselves flying, then of course we're, flying on an aircraft, right? Now, if you're talking about a bird flying, then yes, that's also quite clear. So we don't need to specify using a new different verb whether we're flying on our feet or we're flying on a vehicle. That's just nonsense. So we only actually get bothered about direction, yeah? So whether it's unidirectional or multidirectional. And good news, we don't actually worry about aspect that much in Russian either. We very rarely use the perfective of any of these motion verbs. So you can ignore them for now, definitely. So let's have a look at some motion verbs then. Here's the first one. Бегать. Бегать. This means to run. This is in the multidirectional and imperfective, okay? Try and conjugate it yourself first and then see if you get it right. Я бегаю, ты бегаешь, он, она, оно бегает, мы бегаем, вы бегаете, они бегают. Okay? Now for the unidirectional. That will be бежать. Бежать. Я бегу, ты бежишь. Он, она, оно бежит, мы бежим, вы бежите, они бегут. There we go. So what is the difference between these two verbs? Hopefully you should be familiar with this already, but just to confirm, if you say я бегу, the only thing that can mean is that you are running right now. So it's the present continuous in English. I am running. You are in motion at this very moment. Whilst if you say я бегаю, that either means that you are running around somewhere in no particular, with no particular destination, no set direction, just aimlessly running around somewhere, or you are performing several round trips, so return journeys if you like, okay? Now I did say that you don't need to worry about aspect, and yes you don't. However, if you want to form the simple future tense, then of course you'll need the perfective. So if you want to say I will run, that will be я побегу. Я побегу, okay? You can also say я побегаю. That also works. You can use it with both. It's just that, as I'm sure you can guess, the meaning is ever so slightly different. But likewise, you can form the compound future tense if you like. Я буду бегать. Я буду бежать. Those are both fine as well. If you have any problems with the future tense at all, then please refer to lesson 26. Now let's move on to the next motion verb. Летать. Летать. This means to fly. Я летаю. Ты летаешь. Он, она, оно летает. Мы летаем. Вы летаете. Они летают. Okay? Лететь. Лететь is the unidirectional form. Я лечу. Ты летишь. Он, она, оно летит. Мы летим. Вы летите. Они летят. There we go. And finally for today, in terms of motion verbs, плавать. Плавать. This is to swim. Я плаваю. Ты плаваешь. Он, она, оно плавает. Мы плаваем. Вы плаваете. Они плавают. And in the unidirectional, it will be плыть. Slightly different there. Плыть. Я плыву. Ты плывешь. Он, она, оно плывет. Мы плывем. Вы плывете. Они плывут. Okay, not that easy to pronounce, I do know. Just try your best. Now, of course, you could also form the simple future tense here. The prefix is actually always по with these motion verbs. So, я поплыву or я поплаваю. And likewise with the previous verbs, я полечу, я полетаю. Same idea, yes? Any questions regarding this at all, please feel free to ask in the comments, or you can rewatch lessons 27, 28 and 48. But now let's move on to the actual main section of today's lesson, traveling in Russia. So how is this going to work? We're going to take each mode of transport separately, and I'll start off by introducing some basic vocabulary to you, and then we'll move on to this virtual tour, as I say. Basically, it's just going to be a short video clip where we're just going to say what we see, really, and hopefully we'll be able to identify all the words that we looked at prior to watching the video. So you've learned a few words, and then hopefully in the video you'll be able to spot them. I will also point out a few other things, give you a few tips, explanations on traveling in Russia, and if you happen to come across anything in the video that you would like to ask about, or something that you might have spotted and you want to find out what it is, whatever, as always, write your questions down below. Okay, let's get started then. In this video, we're only going to look at flying and traveling by train. All the rest, all the other modes of transport will be in lesson 56, okay? So I assume that you will be flying to Russia if you get the chance to visit the country. But of course, as you know, you can get to Russia by sea and by land as well. But yeah, most commonly it's just flying. So here's our first word. Самолет. Самолет. And this is an aeroplane. And now that I've seen it, I might as well mention it to you. Whenever you have the letter yo in a word in Russian, that is always going to be the syllable under stress. And as far as I know, there are no exceptions to this rule. So whenever you see a yo in a word in Russian, that is the letter you're going to stress, okay? The only problem is that in many texts in Russian, or on street signs particularly, you will not see the letter yo. You will not see the two dots added on top. Native speakers, of course, know that it is pronounced yo just by, experience. Yeah, for you that might be a bit harder. In any case, if you see the yo, put it under stress. Right, let's carry on. Аэропорт. Аэропорт is an airport, quite obviously. And here are two useful phrases. Лететь на самолете. Лететь на самолете. To fly by aeroplane. So you can see here we're using the prefix na in Russian. With any mode of transport, you use the prefix na, okay? And if you want to say at the airport, then you will say в аэропорту. В аэропорту, okay? This is an exception, as I'm sure you've gathered, because usually with the prepositional case, we add on the letter ye, and it would be something like в аэропорте, yeah? But this is just one of those irregularities. There are a few words in Russian like лес, which is a forest, and you will say в лесу, and here as well, in this case, в аэропорту, okay? You just have to remember that. Вылет means departure, and this is specifying that the departure is by air. So usually in English, when we say departure and arrival, it could be any mode of transport. In Russian, if you're specifying that you're taking off, so the departure is by air, it's вылет, okay? Вылет. Hopefully you've made the link with выход, yes? Ход comes from ходить, so that's the motion verb meaning to go by foot. So that means an exit for people walking on feet, basically. Whilst an exit, inverted commas, for aeroplanes will be вылет. And you can see the root of the verb лететь there, okay? And then we have прилет, which is arrival by air. Полет and рейс are two synonymous words. They mean flight, and a very common expression in Russian, приятного полета, which means have a nice flight or enjoy your flight. Okay, there we go. Now let's actually have a look at a video clip and see what we can spot. So here we are at the airport. This particular one is Domodedovo Airport in Moscow. It is one of the one of the four main airports in Moscow, the other ones being Sheremetyevo, Vnukovo, and Zhukovsky. Okay, this one is Aeroport Domodedovo. Okay, and yeah, I might as well mention, if you go to St. Petersburg, then the airport over there is called Pulkovo. Okay, so what can we see then? Well, in the distance, we can see the airport itself. Remember, that is aeroport. To the left, you can actually see the runway ever so slightly. That will be взлетно-посадочная полоса. Взлетно-посадочная полоса. A bit of a mouthful, could be a shorter word, but you know, this is just the way it is in Russian. And of course, you are not necessarily going to need this word when you are traveling in Russia. So as I've mentioned to you previously, only learn the vocab that you know will be useful for you. If you are a bit of an aviation enthusiast, then by all means, go and learn the word for runway and engine and wing and so on. But if you're not, you don't need this word. So only learn what common sense tells you to learn, or unless I specify that this word is going to be useful for you. Okay. Here we can see an aeroplane taking off. So how do you say aeroplane in Russian? Самолет. Yeah, самолет. Now, the verb to take off will be взлетать. Взлетать. And I hope that you've spotted that this is actually a prefixed motion verb, so a modified version of the verb лететь or летать. Yeah, literally what we've seen right now. Vz is our prefix, and that is conveying this idea of lifting up or upward motion, so flying up, literally. And that means to take off. So we can say самолет взлетает. Самолет взлетает. The airplane is taking off. Okay, great. And down here we have a bit of a forest. That is лес in Russian. I did mention this a few minutes ago. Лес. And now let's actually go inside the airport and see what we can spot there. So you can see here on the second floor, well actually yeah, in English we say the first floor, don't we? And then the ground floor is the very bottom one. Now while we're here, I'll tell you that in Russian it's slightly different. The first floor is the ground floor, right? The second floor is what we call the first floor in the UK or America or whatever. So yeah, just bear that in mind. So on the second floor in Russian, второй этаж, right? You can see a few shops and restaurants. That will be магазины и рестораны. Магазины и рестораны. Okay. We have an escalator here, the same word we have in Russian, escalator, and same goes for lift. In Russian we say lift. Yeah, just put a Russian accent on and you'll be okay pretty much. Let's now continue. If you go to a smaller airport in Russia like this, as you can see, the scale is also a bit smaller. Here we have a waiting room basically, and in Russian that will be зал ожидания. Зал ожидания. Okay, you'll come across that word later as well. Up there you can see the timetable with all the departures and arrivals. In Russian we say табло. Tableau comes from the French word for board, tableau. And yeah, as you'll notice actually, many words in Russian are loan words from French and English actually. Now we'll go to the check-in desks. In Russian that will be стойки регистрации. Стойки регистрации, okay? There is where you get your посадочный талон. Посадочный талон, your boarding pass. If you're bringing luggage with you, then you'll need to check that in. In Russian, luggage will be багаж, багаж, okay? And of course, you need to bring with you your passport. In Russian, паспорт. Couldn't be any simpler. Okay, you are also hearing an announcement in the background. In Russian, that is объявление. Объявление. Okay. Right, now let's actually get on the actual airplane itself. Remember, aeroplane is самолет. So we're about to take off. Remember, that will be взлет. Взлет is the noun for takeoff. Вылет is, of course, departure. So on our approach to our destination, we'll start descending. That will be снижение in Russian, снижение. And then посадка. Посадка is the actual landing, okay? It actually comes from the verb садиться, which means to sit down. And in Russian, we also use this verb to talk about the landing of an aeroplane. So essentially, an aeroplane is sitting down. It kind of makes sense, doesn't it? But you will also hear, of course, прилет or прилетать. Yeah, that means to arrive by air. Okay, there we go. Now we're ready, I think, to move on to traveling by train. So a train in Russian will be поезд. Поезд. Вокзал is a railway station. Вокзал. And this is a railway station in a city, yeah? So it's a large railway station with a, beautiful building usually. If you're going to be talking about a station somewhere in the countryside, then we use a different word for that. Now, previously, we talked about departure and arrival by air, and we had specific words for that. This time, or pretty much for any other mode of transport, you can use the following words. Отправление, отправление, departure, and прибытие, прибытие, arrival, okay? Now, a smaller station will be станция, станция, as we've seen in previous lessons already. Платформа is a platform, платформа, and then путь is a track, путь. Путь actually also means journey or trip, but in this case, or in the context of traveling by train, путь actually means something else, and I'll explain it to you when we get to the video. And then вагон, вагон is a carriage. Very similar to the word wagon, as I'm sure you've noticed there. Okay, now let's go to the railway station in Russia. So as you can see, here we are at the вокзал, and the company that runs all the railways in Russia is РЖД, Российские железные дороги, the Russian railways basically. And it is a nationalized system. As far as I know, there are very few private companies. Most of it is owned by the Russian government. So there you can see the entrance. Of course, that is вход, вход. And now we're ready to go inside. Let's have a look what we can find there. Okay, great. So there are a few signs for us to look at already. And yes, I know there is the English translation below. But, nevertheless, туалеты, toilets, зал ожидания, that's what I mentioned earlier at the airport. Yeah, it's just this waiting area, sitting area, whatever. And then we have the начальник вокзала, the head or the boss of the station. Here you've got a vending machine from the Soviet times called газированная вода, which is sparkling water. Of course, nowadays you can find many more things there, like lemonade and all the other soft drinks. And yes, here is the табло. And you can see there we have отправление, departure, and прибытие, arrival. And all the arriving and departing trains, their numbers, their destinations, and their timings. So as you can see, some trains actually stay. They stop at the station for a while. They have a bit of a break, and all the passengers can get off. If they have the chance, they walk around the city for a little, or they at least go and have a meal or whatever, and then carry on with their journey. Now let's see if you can understand anything from the announcement.
Пассажирский поезд номер 374 Махачкала, Тюмень прибыл на 4-й путь ко второй платформе.
So basically a passenger train, and that means just a train for passengers rather than for cargo, номер 374 has arrived at the 4th track, четвертый путь, to the 2nd platform. And this is the odd thing about platforms and stations in Russia, as I mentioned. So what we refer to as platforms in English, that is путь in Russian, that is the track. And then each track itself, because it's so long, is divided into platforms or imaginary platforms, basically different sections. So the very, very end of the track of the путь might be platform 1, whilst the very start might be platform 5 or whatever, yeah? Because trains are just so long, there are so many carriages, they can stop at different parts on this platform. So yeah, it's really not that hard to find your train. You just look at the путь, you go to that путь, and then you find the platform on that путь. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. And the train was traveling from Makhachkala, which is in the Caucasus, in the very south of the country, to Tyumень, which is a little town in Siberia. Here you can see the кассы, which are the ticket offices. We saw this actually in lesson 53 at a shop, and in that case it will mean checkout, but the idea is the same. You get your tickets or you buy your food, whatever. So you can see it also says кассы дальнего следования. Кассы дальнего следования, long distance ticket offices. So for trains that travel over long distances. And in Russia, this is slightly different, and this is what I wanted to mention to you. So due to the scale of the country, you'll find that intercity trains are actually called long distance trains because the journeys are actually quite long. It could be they could range from a couple of hours to a couple of days, yes. And so on these trains, you'll find there are sleeping compartments offered to you where you will sleep, and you'll be provided with all your necessary amenities and so on, because the journey is just long. And the ticket offices for a long distance train will be in one place, and then for short distance or suburban trains, there will be somewhere else. So here is the зал ожидания. Zal actually means hall, so it does tend to be quite a large room, as you can see. Here are the toilets, and then in the distance you can see a little souvenir shop. If you're lucky, you might even find a столовая. So here we are on the platform, and this is what we refer to as путь in Russian. So this long strip of concrete or whatever, this is путь. And then it is divided into imaginary sections called platforms, platforma, okay? So that's basically what we mean. Right, let's have a look at what this sign says here. Стоять у края платформы не допускается. So pretty much don't stand by the edge of the platform. So as you can see to the right of us here is a long distance train with many carriages, and this is probably actually the one from Makhachkala going to Tumin, stopping over here. And yes, all of these carriages will probably be sleeping compartments, and you can choose whether you want to sleep in kind of like a dormitory with many other people, so it's like a communal sleeping area, or I recommend that you choose a coupé ticket where you have a sleeping compartment where you share it with 4 other people. If you're lucky, you might have it all to yourself, but it can have up to 4 people in there. And that is, of course, much better. It gives you more privacy and so on, but it is, of course, more expensive. There is also a wagon restaurant, usually in the train, which is a restaurant carriage where, yeah, self-explanatory, you can go and have a meal there. And actually, if the train does stop in some large city like this one, then you will find, usually these are old people standing on the platform and trying to sell you their apparently fresh bakery produce, or other little souvenirs here and there, maybe a few amenities, toothpaste, or even things like milk and bread. And so it's up to you. If you're happy with the price, then why not? But other than that, people tend to bring their own food, and as I say, it is usually something ready to eat. Just you put some hot water in, and there you go. But of course, you've always got the option of the restaurant if you like. Now, one other thing to note is that usually all times are given in Moscow time at railway stations and on tickets and so on. And that is because there are 9 time zones in Russia. And so if your train is going to cross several time zones, it will be quite confusing if all the times are different. So to standardize everything, we have times given in Moscow time, and so here on the clock you can see both local and Moscow time. And yes, this area is just a place, as I was talking about earlier, for passers-by to wait for their train to depart. As you can see, there is a pharmacy here. How would you say that in Russian, by the way? Yes, that would be apteka. And there we go, there's a sign for пригородные кассы. Пригородные, and that means suburban. So that is in contrast to поезда дальнего следования. Okay, so those are 2 different trains. And I think that is it for today's video. We've covered everything we need so far. We'll look at the remaining modes of transport in the next lesson, in lesson 56. But for now, as I keep saying, if you have any questions at all, then please do not hesitate to ask them in the comments, or you can send us an email as well. All the details for social media are below. And yes, I hope you found this useful. If not, then please do give us some feedback. And I will see you next time. All the best. Goodbye.